But still he was on about how he would get the Mester Stoorworm and he was the one who was going to get rid of it. And his brothers looked at him with scorn. You couldn't get rid of anything, never mind the Mester Stoorworm. Well, the following week, once again, the Mester Stoorworm took what was offered to it and stayed. The Crisis Fellowship met again for the 8th time. And the king, looking around, said, "This is not working. The Mester Stoorworm is not leaving us. Sorcerer, your plan does not work. I told you 2 were the ways that would cure your Mester Stoorworm. We've tried way number 1. Perhaps it's time to try way number 2. Let's hear it then," said the king. "I must warn you first," said the sorcerer. "You're not going to like it." "Well, I'll be the judge of whether I'm going to like it or not," said the king. "Yeah, I know you're not going to like it," said the sorcerer. "How do you know I'm not going to like it?" asked the king. "I just know," said the sorcerer. Well, the only thing I can imagine that I wouldn't like is if you were going to suggest right now that I have to offer up my own daughter, Gwendolyn, to the Mester Stoorworm. "How did you know that's what it was?" Too late. He'd spoken. And the whole room fell silent. And the king's face turned grey. "This is the only way, your majesty," said the sorcerer. And the king was in shock. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "There must be another way." "No, this is the way," said the sorcerer. Well, that night the king went to his most trusted servant, who was called his Kemper man, called a fighting man or a trusted servant. "Send word throughout the whole of Orkney. Send word to the Scottish mainland. Send word all around. We need champions here. Someone to come and fight the Mester Stoorworm." And so it was that letters were sent and horsemen were sent off to ride to all corners of Scotland. Who is the champion who will come and fight the Mester Stoorworm? And 1 week later, there were 36 huge champions arrived on Orkney. "Let's see that Mester Stoorworm, I'll soon have him," they were saying. "No problem to me, I'll just get rid of your Mester Stoorworm for you," said another. And they were met down at the shore by the Kemper man. "Come with me," he said. "I'll take you straight to the king." They went to the king. And the king opened up his big wooden chest that he had in his throne room. And out of it, he brought on his hands the most incredible sword anybody had ever seen. This was his own sword, Snickersnapper. And people said that Snickersnapper was made and used by the god Odin back in the old days. And that Snickersnapper had special powers. And the king said, "Whichever one of you defeats the Mester Stoorworm shall not only have my kingdom, you shall have my sword." And at that, the champions' eyes opened very wide and they saw this beautiful sword that was said to have been made by the god Odin back in the old days. "Let's see it then, let's see the worm," they were saying. And they were all taken up to the top of the cliff and they looked down at the worm. Well, a quarter of them just froze like that when they saw the worm. They never unfroze. They're still like that on Orkney right now. Frozen to stone. And I'll show you a picture of that later on, okay? A quarter of them suddenly remembered that they had to be somewhere else. One of them went, "Oh, I think it's my tea time. I've got to go now. Oh, I think I left the iron on. I was doing something at home. I think I've got to go now. Oh, I think I left a tap on at home. I think I've got it." And they left. Another quarter of them just, when the king turned around, they were just gone. He's, "What do you think?" And he turned around, they were just not there anymore. And the last quarter, they actually stood their ground. They stood and they looked at the king and they looked at the Mester Stoorworm and they said, "None of us can fight this. It's too big. It's too terrible. We cannot fight the Mester Stoorworm. We're sorry, Your Majesty." and they left with their dignity. They went off. But that night, the night before, the king's daughter was due to be taken down to the beach. It was a very sad night in the castle. He had lots of people staying there, and there was a big meal. The king couldn't eat. He wasn't hungry. Everyone went to bed. And later on, the Kemper man, his fighting man, found him in his throne room, opening his chest. Your Majesty, why do you open the chest? And the king was taking out the sword. Sire, why are you taking out the sword? You're an old man now. Your fighting days are behind you. You're not a fighter anymore. And he said, Kemper man, I have to do this. Tomorrow I will go down, make my boat ready down at the shoreline. I will get in my boat and I will sail out and I will fight this Mester Stoorworm. If I succeed, my daughter Gwendolen is saved. If I perish, if the Stoorworm beats me, I trust you to defend Gwendolen against the Stoorworm. I will do it, sire, anything. But your fighting days are beyond you. This is not going to work. It must be done, said the king. Make my boat ready. And so, the following day, before Gwendolen was brought down to the shore, the king's boat was made ready on the shore. It's quite a small rowing boat, not a gigantic boat. A guard was placed to guard the boat, and everything was set for that terrible day when the king would ride out to fight the Mester Stoorworm and defend Gwendolen. Now you can find out tomorrow what happens when he goes out. Well, does he go out? Who do you think goes out in that boat? What do you think is going to happen? I think we can all agree that Gwendolen's not going to end up being eaten by the Mester Stoorworm, right? That wouldn't be such a great fairy tale. Has to have a happy ending of some sort. Who do you think is going to go in that boat? And if it's the person that I'm thinking of, how do you think they're going to fight the Mester Stoorworm? I wonder how you would end this story. Okay? If it was up to you, if it was your story, how would you finish it? Well, you'll find out how I finish it tomorrow in the final part of, I think it's the final part, hopefully, the final part of Assipattle and the Mester Stoorworm. I'll see you then.